All right, welcome back to Danger's Edge. This is Ryan here, and today our topic is if knife throwing is dangerous or violent. Now, there's certain people I've come across who have had, issues with knife throwing in the sense of it being a violent sport, a violent thing to do. Like, you seem like an edgy character if you go out in the woods and throw weapons and try and stab them in the wood. So I'm just gonna kind of talk about my opinion on all this and really kind of debunk a lot of this myth, I guess. So first off, we're gonna start with the knife itself. So here I have a knife.
Wow.
Actually, this isn't even a throwing knife. I bought this on eBay because I thought it looked cool, and you can throw it, but the other two I have, the tip really broke off. So anyways, interesting about knives that you throw is that they don't have a blade on the side here. Like, this is not sharp. It's a very flat surface. This one especially is very thin because it's not a throwing knife. But if you look at most, it's going to be pretty flat here, it'd be like throwing your iPhone almost like on the side there.
Come on, man.
You're not going to cut yourself as much, so just pointy, because that's all you really need. You just really need a good point, so that way when you throw it, it'll stick. That's all you need. So, the idea that throwing the knife, you can cut your finger. It depends on how you throw it. Sometimes you'll get burrs. If you don't know, burrs are when you throw a knife and a little sliver of metal, like a splinter, gets into your skin, and it sucks. It's painful, and it usually happens when you're throwing multiple knives, and you throw one in the target, you throw another one, and it slices that one and gives it like a little hook, So a lot of times you won't notice it until you get your knives back. You throw for your next round, and you get one right in the finger. So it's more of just being aware of, if you ever see them clash, just grab your knives, check them out, make sure they're not pointing or having burrs, and you're good to go. But besides that, you're not really going to have much self-harm from throwing all day. You might develop certain calluses, and my hands have definitely gotten over time scratched up, especially from a lot of no spin. If you know a no spin, you're gonna be pushing off the ridge of your knife like this, and so it's just a lot of contact on one little piece of skin that will eventually wear it down. So in that sense, that's the worst you're gonna expect from traditionally operating as you should for knife throwing. You do one part that is quite dangerous is the bounce back, and this is something that catches a lot of people off guard, but still rarely has any kind of damaging effect. That's because when you throw a knife, and it bounces off the target, the likelihood of it coming directly back to you, and with the amount of energy that you threw at it, is just not going to be as intense as it was when you threw it. And so if you're aware, I'm always ready for the bounce back. I understand it's a situational thing, but there's a lot of ways you can kind of circumvent that. One is throw from a farther distance. It's going to be more fun of a challenge. You'll be more satisfied with every stick that you get because you're not going to be sticking as often. And when it bounces back, you're going to have way more reaction time. So just don't be super close and throw it really hard. I think that's the thing that a lot of new people do, is they throw the knife really hard. You really shouldn't be doing that until you're really confident. It's really not something that you should play around with. Just like any sport, really, I think that knife throwing is very similar to sports like archery, sports like darts. I'd say boomerangs are more dangerous than knives. There's a lot of misconceptions about what kind of damage the knife also does to the environment. So there's a lot of nuance to this, and it really comes down to good etiquette. I think you'll find that a lot of this is just good knife throwing etiquette that we're talking about. So when it comes to knife throwing in the wilderness, is what we do as a predominant way of providing unique entertainment, is that we only throw at trees that are dead. We only throw at trees that have been lopped off. There's only a stump left, or there's the whole tree with a perfect flat target. So there's a lot of reasons that you'd want to throw this over a live tree anyways. If you're throwing at a live tree, first of all, you're going to get a lot of sap on your blades because you're digging it into the veins of the tree, and you're going to get liquids, you're going to get sap on your stuff, so you really don't want to be throwing at those anyways. Throwing at dead trees is just way better. Most of the time when trees are cut and they fall, they make a natural target, as you've probably seen in our videos, where it's facing up to the sky, and you don't really have to aim low, which I hate. I hate throwing below my arm's height because it's just a weird way if you think about how the knife is going in the target down as opposed to up. It's just a weird angle. So we're not really doing that much damage to anything that's living. And we usually don't at all. We go on our trips, when we went to Yosemite, there were so many trees that the Forest Service just chopped off, decapitated. And, they've been sitting there for like 40, maybe not 40, I don't know how long trees take to decompose, but a very long time. Like, these trees have been just sitting there in the forest, decapitated, laying there. And throwing a little piece of metal and pricking it is, the least of the worries of any kind of harm, because, first of all, we didn't cut down the tree. The point is that when we're throwing knives at the dead tree, we're not really doing any harm. And if you look at the fibers of the tree, too, they almost, like, regenerate or just close any kind of hole that a knife could make. When you throw it and poke it in, you take it out, the fibers kind of just like swell, I guess, and they cover ground that otherwise we made a hole for. So knife throwing isn't very dangerous to yourself in the sense of, like, if you're operating properly, like any sport. It's not really dangerous to the trees or nature around you because it's so minuscule, and we're only throwing at dead things. We're not throwing at any live trees. And, moving forward from there, the idea is, like, is it damaging to society? Is it, like, a violent thing to be showing people, like, hey, go buy knives and throw them? And, this is a question that I would say, obviously, to me, is not a bad thing to throw knives. But I see the concern, right? Because it's a sport where you need to have credibility, or, like, you need to be mature to actually operate in a way that isn't dangerous, right? If you go out and buy knives and just throw them at anything without, like, an education of how bounce back is, how to throw it properly, or, like, your surroundings, like, you don't want to be around people, you don't want to throw where the background, if you miss, it's going to go towards somebody or somewhere. You don't want to lose knives too, because then you're just leaving a sharp object in the middle of nowhere. So there's a lot of etiquette, like I said, and it's really hard to quantify if, when you throw knives and you post it on the internet, if you're actually causing any kind of harm to society. I see a lot of other dangerous things, like, I don't know, just to name a few random things, like parkour could be a very dangerous thing. You go jumping off a building and someone sees that and they want to try and do this crazy jump. Driving a vehicle, right? It's a very dangerous act, even though we're all used to it. But you influence young people to be like, I want to go fast in the car. I saw some guy drifting. Like, everything can be considered as influence, right? And I think that everything can be a bad influence depending on who's receiving it. But is the person who is doing the task that someone is observing, are they held responsible? Maybe in some senses, I'd say that comes down to if they're being responsible, right? Like, if you watch our videos, you see that we're throwing with no one else around. We're throwing in controlled environments. You can tell that we take it very seriously. We're not, like, drinking and throwing, or, like, doing blindfold, kind of like throw at my friend's hand. Like, we're not doing things that are very dangerous. We even have a warning before our videos now, so there's that's our opinion is put right there. Boom. Don't throw at animals. Don't throw at other people. Be responsible. Don't leave trash wherever you're going. Things like this. And by, having a hobby that people see as violent or dangerous, even though by definition there's no violence in throwing a knife. Violence is an act from one being to another to cause suffering. But the point is that, like, you're not doing anything wrong, and how people interpret that is not really up to you. So, as long as you, like, if you're a knife thrower out there and you throw, as long as you keep it serious, you understand that this is a hobby, much like the mountain biking or, I don't know, like cliff jumping, there's risk involved. But as long as you're operating in a sense where you take it seriously and you're putting a good example of how to do these things, you're not necessarily causing any kind of harm to society. If anything, you're refining the ways that this activity can be done properly, optimally. So, I think that in all in all, like, nature knife throwing is not really something that I would ever consider a bad influence. Knife throwing in general is a dangerous sport if you're bad at it. If you're operating in a mature fashion, you're gonna find that you can do a lot in the knife throwing world without being a nuisance, without causing harm to yourself or others. And it's really easy once you get the hang of it, because you want to be doing these things that are good for you and the community. You don't want to be doing these things that are bad, because they're just probably going to end up hurting you first before you hurt anybody else. Like, you just want to make sure that you're doing it right and putting on a good example. So overall, I don't think that knife throwing is something that anyone should be necessarily afraid of doing. It's a great workout. You get to hone in on your physical form of a specific task, feel like the nuance of your body to perform in a certain way. And it's really cheap too. Like, you can buy a pack of knives for like $30, and those knives will last you forever. You might need to resharpen them, get the rust off if they get a little rusty, but besides that, your knives are going to last a long time. So it's a really great hobby just for a budget person, I guess. Like, as a mountain biker too, it's a very expensive hobby. You can buy thousands of knives for the price of a bike. So just something to keep in mind. Anyways, that's all I have for you today on knife throwing. Is it violent? Is it dangerous? My perspective. And I'll catch you guys in the next Danger's Edge video. Bye.